Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023 at 7 p.m. I'm William Lutz, President of Council. We'll begin tonight's City Council meeting with the invocation of the Pledge of Allegiance given by Mr. Rozelle. Please stand.
Heavenly Father, as we embark on the new year, we ask your blessings on all the citizens, community leaders, and all those who give their care and attention to the betterment of our Troy community. Grant us wisdom and discernment as we come together as one body to ponder and make decisions which endeavor to make the lives of all our residents better. Pour upon us the riches of your grace throughout this year as we listen to one another's ideas and set your Spirit forth upon us as the new year brings with it new opportunities for growth, prosperity, and peace amongst all your people. We ask these things through your infinitely majestic name, Lord, Father. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Rozelle. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Marshall. Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Pierce.
Present.
Mr. Rozelle.
Here.
Mr. Schilling.
Present.
Mr. Siebert.
Present.
Mrs. Snead. Here. Mr. Whidden.
Here.
Mr. Twist.
Motion to excuse Mr. Twist.
A second. It's been moved to excuse Mr. Twist by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Siebert. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Siebert.
Yes.
Mrs. Snead. Yes. Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Twist is excused.
Motion to excuse Mrs. Marshall.
Second. Moved by Mr. Phillips to excuse Mrs. Marshall, seconded by Mr. Rozelle. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Rozelle.
Yes.
Mr. Schilling.
Yes.
Mr. Siebert.
Yes.
Mrs. Snead. Yes. Mr. Whidden.
Yes.
Mr. Phillips.
Yes.
Mrs. Marshall is excused.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read a summary of the minutes of the December 19th, 2022 meeting of Troy City Council?
Of Council, December 19, 2022, a public hearing was held on ordinance number 060, 2022. Committee reports by Community Partnerships Committee. 1, the committee recommends 3 legislative items be approved for the Swank annexation from Concord Township. 2, committee recommends legislation be prepared to approve a professional services agreement with Burgess & Nyepel. 3, committee recommends legislation be prepared authorizing placing on the May 2023 ballot the question of approving an opt-out natural gas aggregation program. Law and Ordinance Committee recommended that legislation be prepared to address noxious overgrowth and tree trimmings. Recommended that legislation be prepared to submit to ODOT a speed study of part of Peters Road and part of Riverside Drive, and recommended that the Trex application of Fuel 7 LLC be approved, and a motion was made and approved to accept that Trex. Personnel Committee provided recommendations regarding several board appointments, all of which were approved. Resolution number R84, 2022. Statement of Services, Swank Annexation, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R85, 2022. Buffer Requirements for Swank Annexation, first reading and adopted. Resolution number R86, 2022, consent to Swank annexation was given first reading and was adopted. Resolution number R87, 2022, agreement with Burgess & Nyepel for environmental services was given first reading and adopted. Resolution number R88, 2022, submit to ODOT a request for speed studies was given first reading and adopted. A resolution of memoriam to Richard Burns was approved. Ordinance number 060, 2022, make a correction to ordinance number 042, 2022 was given second reading. Ordinance number 061, 2022 appropriating funds, approval of the budget was given second reading and was adopted. Ordinance number 063, 2022 enacting a section of the ordinance regarding tree trimming and noxious overgrowth was given first reading and adopted. Ordinance number 064, 2022 Place on the ballot the question regarding a natural gas aggregation program with opt-out provisions was given first reading and adopted. Following comments, council adjourned at 8 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Knight. House council wishes to dispose of the minutes?
Move to adopt. Second.
It's been moved to approve the minutes by Mr. Rozell. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Rozell? Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Sievers?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee? Yes. Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Minutes are approved.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We'll begin our committee reports this evening with the Building Committee, and standing in for Mrs. Marshall, Mr. Whidden.
Thank you, Mr. President. On December 22nd, members Whidden and Marshall met to consider authorizing a grant application for $10,000 from the Ohio EPA. Particularly, the city's grant application will be for funds towards purchasing 3 transient pressure loggers to better monitor pressure in the water distribution system. This grant was just announced on December 20th and has an application deadline of January 25th. It is the recommendation of this committee that legislation be prepared authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to submit an application to the Ohio EPA for a public water system equipment grant in the amount of $10,000 for funding of the equipment for the Water Distribution Division, and to execute any related documents if funds are awarded. Based on the application deadline, this committee supports emergency legislation. This was submitted by Mr. Twist, myself, and Mrs. Marshall as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Whidden. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we'll go to the Community and Economic Development Committee, and Mr. Schilling.
Thank you. On December 27th, committee members Pierce and Snee met to consider ordinance number number 060-2022, which provides a correction to section 1143M6B of the zoning code approved by ordinance number 042-2022. In that section, the term Planning Commission was intended to be used. As adopted, ordinance number 042-2022 contains the term Appeals Board. It is the recommendation of the committee that council should proceed to enact ordinance number 060-2022 as before council and as recommended by the Troy Planning Commission so that the correction is made. And this was respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself, Jeff Schilling, as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, move on to the Streets and Sidewalks Committee, and Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. President. This committee met on December 27 regarding the final legislation requested by ODOT for the resurfacing of State Route 55 from Peters Avenue, Grant Street to Franklin Street during state fiscal year 2023. ODOT is bidding the project with the city to pay 20% of the projected cost, currently estimated at $114,631.40. ODOT requires the return of the final legislation and the city's payment by January 27, 2023. It is the recommendation, this committee does recommend that legislation be prepared approving the final legislation for the ODOT urban paving project of resurfacing State Route 55 from Peters Avenue, Grant Street to Franklin Street. Based on the ODOT format and to meet the date of return for legislation to ODOT, this committee supports emergency legislation, and this is respectfully submitted by Mr. Pierce, Mrs. Snee, and myself as chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Are there any comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we have 2 oral reports for liquor permit notices from the Law and Ordinance Committee, and Mrs. Snee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The city has received notification of the filing of the following liquor permit applications. Number 1, a new C1 application for Casey's General Store 2016, which is at 1403 West Market Street. A C1 permit is defined as beer only in original sealed container for carryout only. And the second is a new D1 application for Bob Evans Restaurants LLC at 1749 West Main Street. A D1 permit is for carryout and on-premises consumption of beer until 1 a.m. The police department has advised that there is no basis of objection or requesting a hearing for either application.
Thank you, Mrs. Snee. Are there any comments or questions on these reports? Seeing none, we'll open up to citizens' comments for items on the agenda. We have 3 resolutions and 1 ordinance for deliberation tonight. If If you wish to address council on any of those items, you're invited to come to the podium, give your name and address. You have 2 minutes to address council. Mr. Kerber is our timekeeper this evening. Seeing none, we'll move on to resolutions. We'll ask Mrs. Knight to read the first resolution of the new year, Resolution R1, 2023.
Resolution number R1, 2023. Resolution authorizing the sale during calendar year 2023 of municipally owned personal property, which is not needed for public use, or which is obsolete or unfit for the use for which it was acquired, by internet auction pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 721.15D. This is a piece of legislation that council has to consider annually so that we may sell surplus property through the year. First reading.
Move to suspend the rules.
Second.
It's been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes. Move to adopt.
Second.
The 3 reading rule has been suspended. It has been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Rozell, seconded by Mrs. Snee. Are there any final comments or questions? Seeing none, Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
The resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the next resolution of the evening, Resolution R2, 2023.
Resolution number R2, 2023. A resolution authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety of the City of Troy, Ohio, to submit an Ohio Environmental Protection Agency Public Water System Equipment Grant application and declaring an emergency. This grant is in the amount of $10,000 for equipment for water distribution system. This is the first reading.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Seaver. Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Move to adopt.
Second. 3 reading rule has been suspended. It's been moved to adopt the resolution by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Pierce. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Mrs. Knight, will you please read the last resolution of the evening, Resolution R3, 2023.
Resolution number R3, 2023. Final resolution authorizing consent and cooperation with the Ohio Department of Transportation for the resurfacing of State Route 55 within the right-of-way of the City of Troy, Ohio, in fiscal year 2023, participation in the project, and declaring an emergency. This also provides for the city's payment of about 20% of the cost of $114,631.40. First reading.
Motion to suspend.
Second.
It has been moved to suspend the 3 reading rule by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mrs. Snee. Mrs. Knight, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes. Move to suspend.
Second.
How about move to adopt?
That'll work. That'll work here.
I was wondering how you said because I didn't have a hearing.
We have a motion to adopt by Mr. Whidden, seconded by Mr. Phillips. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We're moving on to ordinances. Will you please read the only ordinance of the evening, Ordinance 060, 2022?
Ordinance number 060, 2022, ordinance amending ordinance number 042, 2022, to make a correction in section 1143.22M6B. This has been recommended for approval by the Troy Planning Commission, and this is the third reading.
Move to adopt.
Second.
It has been moved to adopt the ordinance by Mr. Phillips, seconded by Mrs. Snee. Are there any final comments or questions? Mrs. Knight, please call the roll.
Mr. Rozell?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Siebert?
Yes.
Mrs. Snee?
Yes.
Mr. Whidden?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Pierce?
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. We've come to the end of our legislative agenda. Mrs. Knight, are there any communications or announcements?
No, sir.
Thank you, Mrs. Knight. Moving on to comments of officials. Mayor Oda.
Just to wish everybody a happy new year and welcome back to everybody who is traveling, and happy new year.
Thank you, Mayor. Director of Public Service and Safety, Mr. Titherington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have several announcements, some of which you've all heard before. Leaf pickup continues through January 19th. We will recycle, compost, chip and compost real trees without ornaments or anything else on them, please, through January 31st. I think I saw my first two out in my neighborhood on January 1st. Kudos to them. We are closed, city facilities are closed on Martin Luther King Day, Monday, January 16th, so the council meeting will be the following evening. Trash and recycling will be on schedule. Had a question before the meeting, and I verified that the holiday tree on the square was scheduled to come down today. Weather did make that happen. And so if the weather cooperates and if our partners from AES are available, it'll probably come down tomorrow. Final thing that I do want to say is wanted to commend the street crews over the Christmas holiday and directly preceding. If you recall, boy, this has been a really weird season, getting up this morning to 60-degree weather. If you might recall, though, last week at this time, it was slightly lower temperature than 60 degrees. The Thursday before that, though, it was around 40 degrees. It rained all day. That turned to snow. As it turned to snow, the temperature also dropped to about zero, although it seemed like, I think I saw it register about minus 11 at one point with the wind chill. We did get 2 inches of snow over that evening. Probably more alarming was the fact that the winds were at 20 to 25 miles an hour, which created a lot of drifting. I do want to say that Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Monday kind of had to give them Christmas Day off. We did have 5 different overtime call-outs. We used 234 hours of labor and 142 tons of salt. We concentrated on the mains and the secondaries. It would have been worthless and a waste of a lot of time, effort, and money, frankly, to try to hit the local streets. Salt doesn't work when it's that cold outside, unless you have a lot of traffic and a lot of salt, and so we concentrated on the mains and the secondaries. Had to constantly come back to those because of the drifting. I will say that on Saturday, given that we got about 2 inches of snow between Thursday and Friday, once we finished the mains and secondaries, we being the staff, I'm not going to take full credit for that, we did go back out, the staff did go back out and they called it drift hunting, where they concentrated on the local roads that were exposed on both sides to farm fields and green space, as well as cul-de-sacs where a lot of the drifting happened. So kudos to them. I joked with staff today that I do owe them probably some donuts, although I kind of like to be a little healthier than that, but what the heck. But again, they did a great job. The events that weekend, all 5 days worth, totaled between staff, overtime, equipment, gas, etc., a little over $25,000. So hopefully the one and only event, but that first one was a doozy. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Law Director, Mr. Kerr.
I have nothing to report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. Do any council members have any comments this evening?
I have one.
Mr. Seaver?
You will find, I think everyone got a copy of the HRC report. Did everyone get one? Okay, so as the liaison for City Council on the Human Relations Commission, you should have a report. I would note, I read it, I didn't participate in its putting together or the words on here, but it is very accurate as to what HRC did. But what's not included in here was the formation of IDEA Troy, which is sort of the offshoot branch of the Human Relations Committee that is going to be more of the, well, the HRC is designed to do certain things within the new bylaws. The IDEA group will be the ones who will take over the Martin Luther King holiday, the Juneteenth holiday, and continue to promote those issues. I serve on the Juneteenth committee as well. There's going to be a very nice Juneteenth this year. There's lots of planning. I think it's grown every year, but there's lots of planning participation for this year. Martin Luther King will be this Monday, or next Monday, I guess. Next Monday. I'll be on. I got an email, but I don't remember the details. Sue might have the details. 16th. We meet at 10 o'clock for the march? 9:30 for the march.
Before 9:30.
9, okay. Oh, Senior Citizen Center, so I hope everyone can participate in that, and anyways, I appreciate serving in that role on behalf of the council, and there is, I think, good has come out of that group, so that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Seaver. Any other council members? Seeing none, do any staff members have any comments this evening? Seeing none, are there any audience comments this evening? Please come forward, give your name and address, and take as much time as you wish to address council.
Thank you, Mr. Lutz. Good evening. Bradley Burner, 105 Crestwood Drive. Well, we're fast approaching an anniversary that I hope we don't forget. Nearly 3 years ago, a Year Zero tornado went through downtown Troy and damaged some buildings, one of which was the Tavern building. I can't say too much about that, obviously, because it's still tied up in litigation, but I want to say this. There are people in Troy who are starting to notice that this has gone on for too long. 3 years. 3 years. And I just saw recently that Mr. Kimball was granted a 90-day extension to the repair orders that were issued to him. And there was an easy way that all of this could have been prevented. And that is if the repair orders had been issued 3 years ago, instead of waiting until the last minute. You guys have backed yourselves into a corner big time on this matter. Big time. Now, a mayor has gone on record as saying, well, we shouldn't tell private property owners what to do with their buildings. You remember that? You may not have a long memory, Mayor, but I've got a real long memory about that, so should the other people of Troy that heard you say that. Well, I've got a question for you guys then. If that's the case, if what Mrs. Otis is saying is true, why do we have a zoning code? Why do we have a property maintenance code? That's telling property owners what to do with the buildings, isn't it? It's telling them where they can put them. It's telling them height requirements, setback requirements, so on and so forth. Basic maintenance requirements. Now, if this was a residential property that had this kind of damage, you'd be all over them like white on rice. You'd have Austin Eidenmiller, Tyler Burner, or whoever out there in a heartbeat citing them. So why is this guy getting any extra special treatment? Is it because he's allied himself with Steve Bruns, who I've heard, and I don't know if it's true or not, is a very well-known Republican contributor in this county? So yeah, you ally yourself with him, you get special treatment, obviously. I said it a few meetings ago, and I'll say it again. The time to end this is now. Now, thankfully, the council did its job and didn't approve joining the appeal. But now that job is not over yet. Do you really think this building owner is going to adhere to the 90-day window? I don't. It's going to be delay, excuse, like it has been for the last 2.5 years, going on 3 years. So when is it going to stop? When is it going to stop? When are you going to finally put this guy's feet to the fire and say either you do this or you're going to be in court again, facing charges? As well as he should. He should be hauled into court, fined, and his economic hardship, I can tell you for a fact, this guy's got money out the wazoo. He's not hard up. I challenge any of you in this room to go look up RK Hydrovac. It's his primary business. It's located up on Wyndham Way in Piqua. Very well-established hydrovacing business. In fact, what it does is roof repairs. One of his primary jobs, believe it or not, was the Hart Office Building in Washington, D.C. And that's no easy job. That's no cheap job either. So you can't tell me that he doesn't have money. He's got money out the yin-yang. It's about high time we hold his feet to the fire and make him spend some of it to do the repairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bangerman. Anyone else wish to address council tonight? Seeing none, we'll adjourn this meeting of Troy City Council. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, January 17th, 7 p.m. Let's back here in council chambers. Thank you for attending. Have a pleasant evening.